Tommy Lau is philosophical, considering that he knows he will never walk again. His life was wrecked one November evening in 2001. Tommy was at a house in a quiet hamlet of East Stoke and was on the phone to his wife of just 8 weeks, who was preparing to make her way over to England from South America. Halfway through their conversation, he heard the sharp crack of glass shattering and felt a sensation like a burning poker down his back. As he turned to look over his shoulder, he could see small wisps of smoke as if it was on fire. Guy Fawkes' night had just been a few days earlier, and he thought he had been hit by a firework. It was all a dream in slow motion, Tommy recalled. When I fell to the ground, I could see my friends coming up to me and saying stuff, but I didn't know what was going on. At first, I thought someone had thrown a firework through the window, especially when I saw the smoke coming out the back. But then it dawned on me what it was, and I was apparently screaming, but I don't remember too much of that. The gunman had fired through the living room window. As he withered with pain, he found that he couldn't feel various parts of his body, and finally realised he had been shot. He was paralysed from the waist down from that moment on. Tommy had nothing to do with gangs, drug dealing or crime. He was just 23 when he became a mistaken assassination target at 5:20 PM on the 8th of November. He was nearing the end of a degree course in fashion at Nottingham University. He had a new wife and he was head over heels in love. Police, who ruled Tommy out as a target early in their investigation, had some obvious leads straight away. The woman in whose home he had been shot was a mistress of a local drug baron. She was having an affair with a young man, who we should call Laurie for this story. And according to the police, he was the intended target. There was clearly a motive if one accepts that the drug baron, at the time on remand in Strangeways Prison in Manchester, awaiting trial for a cigarette smuggling and heroin conspiracy, had sent the gunman, and from the outset, the police certainly felt that he was their prime suspect. However, as time moved on, the less likely it seemed that to most of those who knew anything about the case, that he had anything to do with it. Laurie had done a lot of work for the Gun Brothers at the time, and it was possible that Colin may have become upset about something he had done or owed them. The gunman, who made his getaway on a motocross bike, has never been caught, and the people who hired him have never been identified. That, more than anything else, occupies Tommy's thoughts every day. He mulls it over in his mind, trying to make the connections, trying to make some sense of why he ended up in a wheelchair. The police say they are still working diligently to identify the shooter, but as each year passes, it looks increasingly unlikely that Tommy will ever get closure on the case. In all probability, he will never get to see anyone in the dock for the shooting, though he remains optimistic that someone will tell him what it was all about. There has been very little information from the public to give clue to the mystery. It is often the way that if a case has not been solved relatively quickly, any leads start to peter out into nothing. Tommy feels let down by the police, and with good reason. It was left to him to organise an appeal on the BBC's Crime Watch programme in 2005, and even then the programme almost disguised where the shooting had taken place, such as was Nottinghamshire Police's paranoia about encouraging another gun crime tag in the city's reputation. Tommy is getting on with his life as best as he can. He had to give up his college course after spending 6 months in a hospital bed and cannot work, but he goes to the gym regularly for weight training and to burn off the steam that builds up in his frustration about being in this situation. He does still try to live life to the full. He just wishes he could put the nightmares to bed. It is hard to believe today that in 1990, Nottingham was voted the most desirable place to live in the UK. That same year, The Independent dispatched writer William Leaf to find out about the city. The comments prove interesting when you read with the passage of time. Mr. Leaf asked a number of residents what they liked the most. "It's a great place to live," said Phil, a well-dressed engineer. Helen, a young housewife recently moved from London, was bowled over too. There's no need to worry about bringing up your children here. It's so much safer. Mr. Leaf himself wrote, "The nightclubs are friendly and fight free because each one has a rigorous door policy. You can only go in if you're dressed exactly like everyone else in the nightclub." At 2 AM, punters from Rock City, with short hair and flares, stand chatting in a group, ignoring the heavy metal tribe steaming out of New York, in long hair and drain pipes. Policemen wander about grinning. It doesn't seem quite real. It seemed like a very different place nearly 2 decades ago. Someone who lived in Nottingham since 1995 said, "No matter what the crime figures say, there has been a plausible change in the atmosphere of the city. In the darkness of the night, it has become colder, more cynical and more unfriendly in the city centre. There is a brooding, menacing air outside the bars late on a Friday night, where once there was just exuberance. New community support officers are now stationed in the centre, which they say is to make people feel safer. But as the public and criminals alike are well aware, they have no powers of arrest. The Home Office is effectively placing these volunteers in potentially hazardous situations without the powers or authority of regular police officers, but had the audacity to place them in the police-style uniforms. In the 1990s, the city was still seen as a quaint yet vibrant capital in the middle of England. If there were 3 legends which outsiders always connected to Nottingham City, they were Robin Hood, Brian Clough, and the myth that there was 3 women to every man who existed in the city. Only one of the legends was true. Now the city had a 4th legend: crime. The city has been desperately trying to shrug off the label of the crime capital of the UK, or, more often than not, Shottingham, the gun crime capital of the UK since 2002. It's very difficult to get away from this label. The impact that the gun crime tag has had on the city's image cannot be overstated. It has affected all walks of life, from employers struggling to get credible candidates to job interviews, to 2 universities. In 2002 alone, Nottingham and Trent suffered a 14% drop in applications from students. Investors stayed away. Tourists stayed away. Even the Crown Green Bowls team, which had toured from Kent to Nottingham every year for more than a decade, stayed away. A few weeks earlier, the British ambassador to Saudi Arabia made a reference to the city's crime problems at a function which landed on the front page of the Times newspaper. Sir Sherwood Coper-Coles told an audience of several hundred people in the eastern Saudi city of Al Khobar an anecdote about a British expat working in Nottingham. The businessman said he felt completely ridiculous having to give the British businessmen from Nottingham assurances about the security here in Saudi Arabia, when Nottingham is the murder capital of the UK at the moment, he said. It's far more dangerous statistically to be in Nottingham than to be in Al Khobar, Daman or Riyadh. The first indications of a massively negative media portrayal of Nottingham came in 2002 when the headline writers in London began their assault on the city, although the headline which probably did the most harm was "Assassination City." That came from the Daily Star in 2004, but well before then, the writing was on the wall, not least because of the high-profile murders of the jewellery shop owner and the grandmother, Marion Bates, and the schoolgirl, Danielle Beacon. But it was 2002 when things got really out of control. In that year alone, there were more shootings than the previous 7 years put all together, and many of them were connected to the Bestwood cartel. When the number of shootings first began to rise dramatically in the late 1999, Nottinghamshire Police unveiled their response, Operation Real Estate. It began in February 2000, after a spat of gang-related shootings in St Anne's and the Meadows. and led to armed officers routinely patrolling the streets of the UK city mainland for the first time. This, in turn, led to a national debate about whether police should be armed at all times. The then Assistant Chief Constable Sean Price, who was in charge of the operation, was keen to play down any conclusions that the police's response was an exaggerated one. "There is nothing exceptional in what we are doing here," he said. "This is not a Genghis Khan approach. We are only doing what the police have always done, deploying the level of force appropriate to the threat." He admitted that the violence involving the gangs in the NG Triangle had prompted the move. "We had a situation where, because of disputes between these rival groups of criminals, shootings were happening. For 2 years, 6 armed officers carrying Walter P990 pistols at their hips worked in pairs between dusk till midnight around the St Anne's and Meadows estates. In the first 6 months, 6 shootings were recorded on the estates, compared to 6 in a fortnight just before real estate was launched. The police also made some 150 arrests connected to the gang violence and recovered 15 firearms in the first year. But the community leaders felt that the use of armed officers stigmatised the areas and encouraged the gangs to go underground. "We are being used as a laboratory for a bigger experiment," said Dalroy Brown, community leader of the Afro-Caribbean National Artistic Centre in St Anne's. By November 2001, Operation Real Estate had made 400 arrests and thwarted a number of assassination attempts. More than 100 firearms had been recovered, and 47 Jamaican nationals were among those arrested for attempted murder, firearms and drug offences. Of those who were arrested, the Jamaican authorities wanted to speak to 41 in connection with serious criminal offences in Jamaica. Nevertheless, gun crime overall continued to escalate. In 2001, police in Nottinghamshire dealt with 685 firearm incidences. Back in 1990, the year it was voted the most desirable city to live in, the figure had just been 282. By the beginning of 2002, police had decided a new approach was needed, and in July 2002 set up a project which would be intelligence-led and tackle gun crime across the city. Operation Stealth would be more protective than real estate. Its remit was to stamp out the black-on-black shootings by arresting offenders with firearms before they committed serious offences. But before the stealth team had got stuck into their task, there was another brutal shooting. At around 7 PM on the 19th of February 2002, a young black teenager, Brendan Lawrence, was waiting in his friend's Ford Fiesta XR2 near his home in Watkins Street on the St Anne's estate. It had been pouring with rain, and Brendan had accepted the offer of a lift from his friend, who had nipped inside the house on Watkins Street. Minutes later, a man in a dark blue hooded Donné top, wearing Nike Bohemian trainers, approached the car, pulled out a gun, and told Brendan to get out. He then shot him twice in the leg, pulled him out the car, and shot him again in the chest. The 16-year-old had died on the street. His mother, Janice Collins, would become a tireless campaigner for Mothers Against Guns, a group set up to try and stamp out gun crime. "We buried him in black jeans and a black polo neck top he had brought from Next that week," she later told reporters. His friends were pallbearers, and they looked like they were so young. They were only kids. When Brendan died, they kept him for 8 weeks in the mortuary. I couldn't bear to think of him so cold like that. I hated it that we couldn't bury him. Every week, Calvin, his twin brother, would take me down there to see him, and they would pull him out cold so that I could see him and see that he was alright. No mother should have to go through that. Someone must know something. Brendan was not known to be involved in criminality, but intelligence came through to the police that half a kilo of cocaine had been stashed under one of the car seats, which indicated a robbery motive, as the drugs were missing. The killers, who had clearly had information that there was a substantial amount of drugs in the car, had driven off in the Ford Fiesta XR2, which was later found burnt out at Westfield Gardens in St Anne's. Some DNA was extracted from the particularly burnt pack wreckage, but very little headway was made by the police in terms of getting witnesses to come forward, and so it dragged on year after year, despite there being a £20,000 reward for information leading to the conviction. Every February, Brendan's distraught parents, Janice Collins and Ray Lawrence, have made an annual appeal for information, which they hope will lead to the identification of the killer. In the years that passed since Brendan's death, police arrested more than 20 suspects, but without any breakthrough. In July 2009, 2 defendants went on trial for his murder, and a third for assisting the offender. The jury acquitted one defendant of murder, but failed to reach a verdict on the other 2. A retrial was rescheduled. A list of some of the incidents police were called out to in July 2002 showed how indiscriminate the use of firearms was becoming. On July the 1st, 10-year-old Laurel Akim Warner is shot and wounded at his grandmother's home in Wilford. On July the 5th, a would-be robber walks into a newsagent's in Old Basford and asks for cigarettes, and then fires a shot from a handgun, narrowly missing the 57-year-old store owner behind the counter. On July the 9th, a taxi driver who picks up 2 men outside the Commodore pub in Nuttall Road at 6:20 AM is robbed with a handgun to his head and is forced to drive the men to Brockhurst Gardens in St Anne's. The taxi driver later tells the local paper, "I served in the Gulf War, but left the army for a quieter life. It's not really turned out how I imagined." On July the 16th, a 2-year-old boy is shot in the right arm with an airgun pellet as he plays in the Cotman Hay Park off Buvelle Drive in Cottamy at 6 PM. Surgeons were able to remove the pellet. On July the 17th, 2 robbers entered an unlocked house in Knoll Street, Forest Fields, and hold up a 37-year-old woman and her young child at gunpoint in their own living room. On July the 22nd, an armed robber shoves a handgun into the faces of 2 staff in a raid on Mansfield Road Spa in Sherwood at around 12:20 AM. Witnesses then reported hearing a gunshot as the raiders run from the store with the takings. On July the 26th, a 33-year-old man is shot and wounded outside the Drum nightclub off Ilkeston Road in Lenton. On July the 29th, a young couple from Long Eaton are attacked by 3 men wielding a gun and a knife after they spot them acting suspiciously. The man, a 23-year-old sales manager, has a gun pressed to his forehead and his teeth smashed in with the butt of the pistol. He is told this is what you get for interfering. Analysis by Operation Stealth in the central city area revealed the following. Around 73% of the shooters were black and British born. Educationally, they were almost always underachievers, living in areas where there were limited employment opportunities. The majority were from single-parent families. They were territorially protective, and their role models were drawn from the gangster rap, with lots of bling or jewellery, designer labels on clothes, cash in pocket, firearm in one hand, and doll in the other hand. Their career paths were firmly rooted in criminality, and particularly drug dealing, progressing from street runner age of 12, 11 or sometimes even younger. Their job would be to deliver small amounts of drugs, sometimes on push bikes, sometimes on foot, between people and addresses. For this, they will be given a few pounds, or perhaps a rock of crack or a wrap of heroin to sell for themselves. By the time they were 13 or 14, they might be babysitting a firearm for one of the brethren, or a larger amount of drugs at their home. And by the time they arrived in their late teens, they might be street dealing themselves, or have a pack of runners working for them, just as they had done themselves. Other black on black shootings demonstrated the cheapness with which life was perceived by those living in the ghetto. On the 9th of November 2002, 33-year-old Teresa Jacobs, a female crack cocaine dealer, was shot in the back of the head outside the Drum nightclub off Ilkeston Road. Jamaican national Aston Bowler faced trial over her murder, but the case collapsed when the CPS offered no evidence though Mr. Bowler was actually deported. Almost a year later, at 1 PM on the 7th of November 2003, 24-year-old father of two, Omar Watson, walked into his local barbershop to have his hair cut, but almost as soon as he sat on the chair, a gunman walked in and shot him dead. It was believed his killer had lookouts who had phoned to say he was on his way to the hairdresser's shortly before the murder. On a cold February morning, a young man waked in a telephone box on the St. Anne's estate to hear from his dealer. It's a phone box well used for this purpose. The man, though, is disturbed by a youth banging on the glass bit outside. He says something. Gradually the man can make out his words. "Hey mate, what do you want? Rock or brown? I can do you anything," the youth says, nodding knowingly. The man has not seen the youth before and is intrigued enough to abandon the wait for his dealer's call. He steps out of the kiosk to talk to the 13-year-old. Soon he learns what he can buy from the youngster: heroin, crack cocaine and weed. The teenager gives him his street name, pointing to an emblem sewn on his jacket. "Yeah, that's me, so just ask for ABC." He gives the man a mobile phone number to call, and within a few days, a drug deal is arranged. The next time the man sees the youth is to arrest him. He is an undercover police officer. When the youth is searched, he has almost £1,000 of drugs on him, including 94 wraps of heroin and crack cocaine. ABC's tale is a familiar one. He has been smoking cannabis from the age of 12, buying it on his way home from school as he walked through the St. Anne's estate. Pretty soon he was starting to buy it on tick or credit. He had built up a debt he could not pay off, and the dealers began to threaten him. He told them he could settle it by selling some of their drugs. Within a few months, he was pushing crack and heroin. The courts do a deal with ABC. He is given an antisocial behaviour order which bans him from being on the St. Anne's area. But for every ABC, there are now thousands of others doing the exact same thing on built-up area estates of the UK cities. Operation Stealth proved to be hugely successful in its first 2 years, particularly given that it had limited resources. It was set up in much the same way as that better known Operation Trident, which had been set up by the Metropolitan Police 4 years earlier to tackle black on black crime in the city. Stealth had a team of about 30 officers compared to around 300 at Trident. Yet between July 2002 and October 2004, the Stealth team seized 306 firearms compared to 333 by Trident, and 6,100 rounds of ammunition compared to 1,200 by Trident. The Stealth team also secured 263 convictions over a 2-year period compared with fewer than 200 by Trident. While the success rates were something to be proud of, the intelligence coming through was worrying. There seemed to be an easy access to firearms, particularly replicas, which could be bought across the counter. These replicas could, with a bit of engineering know-how, easily be converted into a fire-live ammunition. The team was also discovering that these firearms were going into the hands of younger and younger offenders. They were becoming fashion accessories for wannabe gangsters, and some were as young as 13. The Stealth team could have helped further if the government had been braver with the new legislation. A minimum 5-year prison sentence for possession of a firearm was brought in during January 2003. It would do little to curb the youngsters' taste for firearms, even after some of those close to the victims saw the impact that guns were having on lives. A minimum 10-year sentence would have been a far better deterrent in the eyes of many police officers. In the early hours of New Year's Day 2003, one of Colin Gunn's enforcers was involved in a reckless shooting incident which almost claimed the lives of 3 people. He turned up at a party being held at a house in Jedburgh Walk in St. Anne's, and within a short space of time had been dissed by some of the partygoers, who took the mickey out of him over something. The man was known to have a short fuse, but no one could have predicted what he did next. He pulled out a handgun and fired 5 times at a number of the party guests, leaving 2 withering on the floor with injuries to their legs and groin. The man fled. 9 days later, Darren Hayden, aged 38, was picked up by officers from Operation Stealth as he drove down Vernon Road, Highbury Vale in Basford at 1 PM on the 10th of January in his red Ford Mondeo. Mr. Hayden, who lived near the gun's mother on Raymead Drive, had convictions for armed robbery and burglary and had recently returned from Tenerife. Police searching his car found a 2-ounce bag of crack cocaine and 1 ounce of heroin worth £4,000, along with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun and ammunition. Mr. Hayden was charged with 3 counts of attempted murder at the party. A third person had been shot but not hit, along with possession of a firearm, ammunition and a controlled Class A drug. But as police attempted to get any witness statements from anyone who was shot at the party, the message came back: no one wants to talk about it anymore. We just want to get on with our lives. By June 2003, the CPS had dropped the attempted murder charges against Mr. Hayden. He then changed his plea to guilty on the firearms and drugs offences and was jailed for 7 years in October 2003. An aggrieved Kate Carty, the chief Crown prosecutor in the Nottinghamshire area, said the CPS decided that there was sufficient evidence to proceed with the 3 counts of attempted murder. The matter then progressed as far as it could in the Crown Court until notification was received that key prosecution witnesses had changed their mind about giving evidence in court. Disappointingly, other witnesses gave further statements that were at odds with the previously stated positions. We reviewed the case and concluded that its success was dependent on the willingness of the witnesses to attend court. In these circumstances, it was agreed that no further progress could be made on the 3 counts of attempted murder. We believe that unless victims and witnesses are prepared to report crimes and give evidence confidently and effectively in court, the public cannot be protected properly. Despite this disappointment, in June 2004, the Operation Stealth team was celebrating success when 9 St Anne's gangbangers were taken off the streets for life after killing a man in Sheffield. The victim was another tragic case of mistaken identity. Some of the gang were in Sheffield's Meadowhall shopping centre when they were ambushed outside the takeaway and robbed of their mobile phones. On the 18th of December 2002, the gang had returned for revenge in a convoy of 4 cars. They pulled up outside the Afro-Caribbean Club in the Still City's Pittsmore area, believing that the people who had robbed them earlier were there, and fired 2 shots from the lead car. An innocent bystander, Gerald Smith, aged 42, was fatally wounded in the head and leg. Ezra Taylor, 26, of Collision Street, Radford; Craig Brooks, who was 26, of Lawn Walk in St Anne's; Roger Gordon, who was 28, of Hunger Hill Road, St Anne's; Gareth Lindsay, who was 20, of Purleythorpe Drive in Carlton; Richard Powell, who was 26, of Ansbury Circus, Cinderhill; Leon Bryan, who was 20, of Limmer Gardens in St Anne's; Gordon McPherson, who was 26, of Curzon Gardens in St Anne's; Dean Pinnock, who was 20, of Melville Gardens in St Anne's; and Christopher Mackenzie, who was 20, of Melville Gardens in St Anne's, all received life sentences at Sheffield Crown Court in July of 2004. It was the first time that a group had been convicted of murder where no one except the killers knew who had fired the fatal shots. This conviction gets right to the heart of all the violent drug and gun crime in St Anne's, said the Superintendent Nick Holmes, Deputy Commander of the Nottinghamshire Police City Division. It smashes its infrastructure. The gang caused misery to all people of Nottingham, and they have been well known to us for years. We have put a massive effort into tackling drug and gun crime in St Anne's and all over the city, and are starting to see the results. The level of urban terrorism being visited upon these communities was becoming shocking, and while stealth concentrated on black on black gun crime in the city centre, another wave of violence was about to come. All eyes would be soon turning to the north of the city, where a ferocious white gang held a tight grip over the community.